Hi everyone, my name is Shivani Upadhyay, and this is my extra assignment that I'm doing for Psych 375 with Dr. Selby. I know it's the end of the quarter, so I just wanted to take the time to say that I enjoyed this class thoroughly. I enjoyed having you guys all as my peers. Um, and thank you, Dr. Selby and the other Dr. Selby, for teaching our class. Yeah, but without further ado, let's get started. So my presentation is titled Teen Pleads Insanity in the Death of His Brother. Kind of a shocking title, but you'll kind of get to see where that's coming from a little bit later in our presentation. And yeah, like I said, my name is Shivani, and yeah, let's get started. So who was involved in this case? I want to give you guys some background before I obviously jump into the logistics of the case and some of the technicalities. So who was involved? The defendant in this case, his name was Cody Metzger Madsen, and he's from Logan, Iowa. He's 18 years old. He was in and out of the foster system since his youth. His mom gained custody and lost custody of him multiple times. So you can kind of imagine what kind of turbulent childhood Cody might have had. Um, and his victim was 5-year-old Dominic Elkins from Logan, Iowa. So Dominic was actually Cody's foster brother. A few weeks prior to this incident, they had finally moved in together in a group home. So that's kind of where this incident took place. On the left over here where I'm circling my mouse, you can see a picture of Cody during his trial, and on the right is the now deceased 5-year-old Dominic Elkins. So what exactly happened? I know I kind of shocked you all with the title with boy kills his brother, teen kills brother. But as you know, they're foster siblings. They just met maybe a few weeks prior, but they had established some sort of relationship with one another. The incident occurred when Cody Metzger Madsen stabbed Dominic Elkins multiple times with a kitchen knife, and the boy was found dead by his foster mother the next morning. So Metzger Madsen, Cody, he had a history of SMI, serious mental illness. Within the article that I was particularly reading, and a bunch of articles that I read that had to do with this case as well, did not go into detail about what specific diagnoses he had, that it just said serious mental illness. But it did specify that he was failing to take his prescribed medication. So you can understand, like, if someone is experiencing like serious mental illness and they're having serious symptoms, failing to take your prescribed medication can obviously result in those symptoms kind of being exacerbated. So when he was stabbing his sibling, or following this incident, he was obviously interviewed by law enforcement and psychologists, and he kind of had differing stories each time, but with a general consensus that he was hallucinating. So yeah, Metzger Madsen claimed to have a vision of a goblin attack. In the years prior to this incident, he had a history of playing this game called Skylanders that many of you might have heard of, but within the game, the goal is essentially to kill mythical creatures to gain points that you can kind of use for your own weaponry and things like that. But Metzger Madsen had a vision that his brother Dominic was a goblin and he wanted to kill the goblin. So he kind of internalized the game and it resulted in the attack. In another account where he was detailing the story, he claims to know that it was not his brother, but he does remember smashing a brick to his face. So you can kind of see some inconsistencies, but with people with SMI, this disorganized thinking is often common. But it's important to note that he was hallucinating and he was deluding. And yes, he pled not guilty by reason of insanity in his case, and he did win in a sense. I guess there's not really any winning in this situation, but he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was put on an indefinite psychiatric hold rather than being obviously imprisoned. So I want to connect this to some of our class concepts kind of briefly. I have a rough overview on the slides here, numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about each one as I speak. So the first topic that I wanted to touch upon was Cody's history of SMI, serious mental illness. More specifically, I believe that Cody suffered from schizophrenia and was having a psychosis incident during the time of the attack. Schizophrenic symptoms are often seen in hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, along with the highs and lows that come with a lot of other mental illnesses. And this was definitely apparent with Cody. He thought his brother was a goblin, and he went to, attack him. And I believe that he was showing schizophrenic symptoms in that moment. Psychosis also occurs when someone isn't aware of what's going on around them and they're kind of tunnel vision into this altered state. And it's also a symptom of schizophrenia, and it's something that's common among schizophrenic patients. And I believe that Cody may have suffered from something like this or something similar to this at the time of the crime. The main thing that I wanted to focus on for the bulk of this presentation was its relation to forensic psychology concepts and like legal rules that we were learning in class. More specifically, we learned about ways that people can plead guilty by reason of insanity and how the history of insanity has kind of changed over the course of the last like few decades. We learned a little bit about the Durham test, and there are a bunch of other like laws that were enforced that kind of determine whether or not someone's mentally ill or whether or not they can be deemed not guilty by reason of insanity. But right now we're following the McNaughton rule, and there was definitely evidence of this within his case. The McNaughton rule states either that A, the defendant's state of mind caused them to commit this crime, and that they didn't know what they were doing when they were doing it, or that they knew what they were doing but did not know that it was wrong. So in this case, Cody thought his brother was a goblin, so he didn't necessarily know what he was doing was incorrect. He thought he was just killing someone who was meant to be killed as per the Skylanders game. He's also mentally ill. He has schizophrenia and psychosis, as we established earlier. He did seem to know what he was doing, but he didn't know that it was wrong. And the whole time, the main aspect that he didn't know was that he didn't know that it was his little brother. So with all of these facts kind of combined together, I can say that his case did follow the McNaughton rule, because he was mentally ill, the illness was the cause of the crime, and he didn't necessarily know that what he was doing was wrong because of his mental illness. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the consequence that Cody was provided, which was indefinite psychiatric hold. I think it's kind of scary to think about psychiatric facilities because in movies and in media, they kind of picture it to be a very scary place where patients are kind of held like without their control, and they don't really have a say in what goes on to themselves within the treatment centers. So it is a controversial topic, but I think in Cody's case, he was a danger to society. Like, who knows when he was going to take his prescription medication, when he wasn't going to take his prescription medication, and would that result in an attack like the one that just happened with his little brother? And obviously the court system wants to prevent that from happening again, but at the same time, you don't want to put someone with SMI in jail where they can't even get rehabilitated or have any chance of getting better, because the chance of them being medicated and going to therapy and everything like that in jail is significantly lower than should the person go to a psychiatric facility. So I think that the decision was good. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done within psychiatric health facilities and like the quality of life that patients there have. But I think it's definitely a better option than, being incarcerated. So I think for an 18-year-old like Cody, this was definitely the correct solution. I also just wanted to connect this to forensic psychology at large. Forensic psychology kind of gives us insight into how serious mental illness and insanity and all of these concepts can be applied to the legal system. So if someone's mentally ill, we want to make sure that we're not treating them the same way as someone who's not. And, because Cody, on one hand, he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but it's not the same thing as someone who goes out and does a cold-blooded murder. So I think forensic psychology kind of allows us to provide more equitable outcomes for people with mental illness, which I think is really helpful to make sure that we're treating people equitably and how they deserve to be treated, rather than putting everyone on the same playing field within the legal system, because there's lots of nuances within that. I've kind of touched upon this a lot within my presentation, but my opinion, I agree with the jury to find Cody Metzger-Madsen by reason of insanity. But I also think that, it's important to acknowledge that former foster youth are an unrepresented group, and many of them get stuck in the juvenile justice system because of the trauma and undiagnosed, untreated mental illnesses that they have that span years, and it kind of transforms into their adulthood. And it's important to take that into account. And maybe this case can be a reflection of the work that needs to be done on former foster youth and the kind of resources that we need to make sure they have access to. I think this case definitely touches upon a little bit of that. But hopefully we get to see some reformation in the area, and it pushes for some more appropriate rehabilitation, because psychiatric health facilities can be a little bit daunting. Anyways, thank you all for listening to my presentation. I know it's the end of the quarter. I'm graduating. Happy graduation to everyone else that is graduating. And yes, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Bye.